Hi guys, and welcome to another video. If you have been to my channel before, hello, hi, it's lovely to see you again. And if you haven't been to my channel before, hello, hi, it's lovely to meet you. As you can tell from the title of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the weird phenomena of girly diary games, if you can call them games, that were released for the DS exclusively throughout 2008 and 2009. Before we begin, as usual, if you do enjoy this video today, please don't forget to leave it a like, comment any games that you would like me to cover down below, and consider subscribing if you want to see more videos just like this one. Not only does it really help out my channel, but it lets me know that I'm making the right type of content for you. And without further ado, let's reminisce and explore the girly DS diary games that were released in the 2000s. As we all know, the Nintendo DS handheld console was released in the year 2004, with the more iconic Nintendo DS Lite coming out a couple of years later in 2006. It obviously goes without saying that the console was made with gaming in mind, but as companies began to realize the multifunctional nature of the DS, they began to cash in on this with titles like 2005's Brain Training, 2007's Flash Focus, and the My Coach game series, which, weirdly enough, included a stop smoking game. And I genuinely wonder if anyone ever considered buying this DS title in order to quit smoking. And when I saw this title, it said Stop Smoking with Alan Carr. And if you're a UK girly, you probably are aware of Alan Carr, the comedian. And I genuinely thought that they made a DS title with Alan Carr helping you stop smoke. Stop smoke? Stop smoking. Now, these games and the aesthetics of these games really make me think of such a specific time in our past, and even though these games were mainly targeted at adults, obviously kids still managed to get their hands on them and play them. I feel so sorry for all the kids who picked up a My Coach game and thought it was a game and not a self-help title. So there was a selection of non-gaming related titles for kids, and specifically in 2008, a weird number of diary/life organization games, really similar in content, appeared on the market, which were specifically targeted at young girls. And we're going to discuss all the ones that I could find in today's video. Whilst researching and producing this video, I decided to do a little audience research and see if any of you guys actually remembered or played any of these DS diary games. And the one that you guys voted for the least was actually the first DS diary game to be put out, and that was Diary Girl for DS, which was released in March of 2008. It was published by Konami, which is a very well established and known game production company that originated in Japan and is still active today, and developed by the UK game studio Team 3. Which is not active today. As all of these DS diary games are so similar, I'm only going to go into this one in extreme detail. So the title is set up to work as a password protected diary and a calendar. As you boot up the game, you are greeted with the front cover of your diary, essentially where you enter your password. And once that is entered correctly, you are greeted with the home screen of the game, which gives you all of the options for all the features that are in this title. In terms of the diary aspect of this title, you could fill out a 300 character description of your day, which really, if you think about it, is not a lot. But then again, as an 8-year-old, is your life really that crazy busy and wild that you need to write more than that? You could also track the daily weather and the way that you were generally feeling that day in a little icon that you could choose, which would then act as kind of like a sticker for each diary entry. In terms of the calendar functionality, you could essentially set yourself reminders. I think you could add 2 reminders in this particular version of the title, and you could also put events and friends' birthdays, which would show up after you entered your friends' details into the address book. As well as adding your friends into the address book and having reminders of their birthdays, you could also communicate with your friends through this title. There was text chat enabled over Wi-Fi if your friend also had the Diary Girl game, and there was voice chat with your friends over local wireless, which, if you had a DS as a kid, or you know in general what local wireless means, it essentially means that you need to be within a specific distance of someone for this to actually work and connect. So in terms of the DS capabilities of local wireless, for the voice chat to work, you'd probably have to be in the same room as your friend, which kind of makes the voice chat feature void, because why would you need to voice call a friend in the same room if they're literally sat next to you? Make it make sense. Although I do recall, actually thinking about it now, that I'm pretty sure that one of my childhood best friends and her brother used to use our DSs as like makeshift walkie-talkies whenever we were playing like secret agent spy games. So I guess it had one use. So in this title in particular, there is 3 different types of mini games, and that is solitaire, a sliding jigsaw puzzle, and a maze game in which you draw through the maze, collect jewels, and then work your way out. And it doesn't stop there, because for the hardcore gamers, there is 3 different levels of difficulty, going from easy, medium to hard. And honestly, looking at these games, they really remind me of some sort of flash game I would find on Miniclip or Girls Go Games as a kid. They look very, very simple, and I'm pretty sure I read somewhere on an article by IGN for this title that the difficulty levels were all completable on each minigame within about 10 minutes. So I don't really think, as an 8-year-old girl, I would feel particularly challenged by any of these games. I'm pretty sure on this game as well, there is some form of horoscope, future telling, prediction thing. I couldn't find any examples of this online, and I'm not sure whether my brain is like Mandela affecting this and making me think that there was when there isn't, but this is a pretty common feature in a lot of other games that we're going to take a look at, so I'm pretty sure it was also a feature on Diary Girl DS. In this game as well, you could design your own avatar, which weirdly enough looks like a mix of Bratz and Mycene, and personally I think they're really, really off-putting. And with the avatar customization, considering how little else there actually is in this game, you would think there would be a lot more options, and I don't know whether it's just because the person who's doing this playthrough hasn't played a lot of the game, so maybe you can unlock stuff in this title, which I know is a feature of other titles going forward. And I feel like on the whole, this sort of bright color clashing pattern assault on the eyes really is popular throughout the 2000s, and although I hate it now, it really, really does make me reminisce and feel nostalgic for the mid-2000s. Now, this diary game title, Diary Girl DS, was a North American release, with the European game coming out a year later in February of 2009, which is crazy because when I first started producing this video, I googled girly 2000s diary game blah blah blah, and the 2 different releases, the European and the North American release, came up, and I genuinely thought they were 2 separate games until I started doing my deeper research. And initially I had them in 2 separate sections, but then as I was looking and I came across sites containing information for these games, I realized they're actually the same game, just packaged differently. Which also means that somehow I managed to get my hands on a North American version of this game, as I had never seen the European release. And I don't know if it's maybe because I had one of those illegal pirated R64 cards, which had all of the like ripped off games on one, what are they called? Oh my god, what are they called? Cartridge on one cartridge, and I guess that's how I got my hands on this. I would have much preferred the European release, not gonna lie. And the theming of the European release of this game was actually Winx, which was quite a niche TV show and like girl group brand in the UK, but I feel like it was probably more popular in Europe at the time, hence why they decided to do this version of the game for the European release. It has literally all of the bells and whistles of the first, just presented in a much more appealing way with the Winx brand. I really think the new style of avatars is much better than the original. I really, really like the new design details that they added to this version overall. And I think it just makes for a more cohesive and aesthetic looking version of the game, which is way more easy on the eyes. Now, I can confirm that in this version of the game, everything is essentially the same, apart from some of the mini games have like elements of it changed. So the sliding puzzles are pictures of the Winx girls, and the home screen is designed a little bit different. So there's like a whole overhaul of some elements of the game. And they also added an extra reminder. Imagine they probably got a lot of complaints saying that obviously people need or might need reminding of more than 2 things in a day, so they added a third. And they also had the horoscope thing in this title. I'm not sure if it was present in the original North American release, but it definitely is there in the European release. Considering that the original Diary Girl game was intended to get girls gaming daily, it's literally like the tagline of the game is that you're meant to use this as a daily companion or like game to game on. The horoscope edition really does help bringing back players daily to get the horoscopes read. So now that we've taken a look at the first and also weirdly last Diary Girl DS game to be released, let's take a look at some more. Now looking at My Secret Diary, which was one of the next Diary Girl DS games to be released, it really screams shovelware at me. And you can really sense that this one was probably rushed out in order to compete with that of Diary Girl DS. My Secret Diary DS was published by Oxygen Studios and developed by Oxygen Interactive, who also released a few other titles of DS Gamer Girl-esque games, which I feel like looking at them were probably made to compete with the Ubisoft Imagine Girls series, as these were extremely popular at the time and were making Ubisoft a load of money. And they obviously did not do very well, as Oxygen Studios did not last very long. And although I kind of bashed Diary Girl and said it was a little bit too in your face, at least it had some character. Like, it was nowhere near a 10 out of 10 game, but compared to My Secret Diary, I will take Diary Girl any day of the week. My Secret Diary has literally all of the features and elements that Diary Girl and the Winx Secret Diary 2009 game does, but no character to go along with it. They did have the diary input, weather and mood trackers, contacts and games, but they did also add an extra horoscope element. So they had the crystal ball thing, but they also added a aura stone, which I feel like kind of is meant to be like a mood ring. Did you ever have one of those where you would like put it on and it would tell you what mood you're in by the temperature of your skin, or like the temperature of the environment around you? So I can imagine that the aura stone and like horoscope things were probably quite entertaining to young girls who played this game. I think obviously they had to separate themselves from the Diary Girl DS game, as they probably didn't want to get sued. And they wanted to set themselves apart from the competition and have their own title with its own sort of theming and branding. But looking at it, it just makes me think that it is marketed and targeted for an elder audience, like a more mature audience, like 13 and up. Like, if you give this to a 6, 7, 8-year-old, it looks boring. Like, the pastels are cute, and I feel like I can appreciate that as an adult who loves pastels, but if you give this to a younger girl, she's just gonna look at it and think, girl, what is this? I know obviously you guys have probably played this, and I'm looking at this with an adult perspective, so let me know if you actually did enjoy this game, or whether you did think it was fairly boring in its design. Next up is, obviously, we've mentioned them before, I've done a whole video on them, Ubisoft, and its Imagine My Secret World title, which I think is actually my favourite of the bunch. It was released in September of 2008, a month before My Secret Diary, and according to an article, Imagine My Secret World was actually developed by a group of psychologists in order to enable girls to be able to express themselves, especially in a stage of your life where a lot of what you're doing is controlled or watched by your parents, and being able to express how you're feeling truthfully where you know that no one's going to be able to access it was probably quite nice. So in this title, there is no limit into the amount of characters or words that you could put into a daily entry. There was just pages and pages and pages that you could write on as long as you wanted to, and capturing your emotion was literally a thing. When you decided how you were feeling that day and the sort of thing that you were going to write about, you were given like a collage, I guess, which was like moving around the screen, and you would like take a screenshot essentially, and that would then become the picture that would go along with the entry for that day. This title also has a load of unlockables, which I think actually gives it more of a game definition than a lot of the other titles that we have looked at, as you actually have a motivation to be doing entries to be able to enhance your experience by unlocking more things to be able to play with in the game. So there were the usual diary elements, games and horoscopes that we've seen before, but in this title in particular there was a much bigger emphasis on sharing this game with your friends, as there was a lot more multiplayer options, particularly for like a group of friends to play together. Like, I remember there being a game where you could test how well one friend knew the other by like voting on particular cards on what you think that your friend would answer with, and you would like fill in friend cards instead of an address book. Essentially what you would fill out for yourself, you would fill out one of those for your friends, and when you wanted to play with your friend you would choose their friend card, and then you could play like games on the DS as you would like pass it around to your group of friends. Visually as well, I really like this game, and there is a ton of customization options for your avatar, which obviously there's an avatar element in this game as there is with all the other diary games, but in this one there is so many choices for customization and options. I think it's really nice. And I also feel like with this one there is a good balance of color and pattern in the theming of the game. It's not as crazy as Diary Girl DS, but it's also not as boring as My Secret Diary. It's a good like middle ground, which isn't assaulting on the eyes, but it's also pleasant to look at. And that's the main diary games that I could find that were released in the 2000s. Obviously that is 4 I think we covered, technically 3 because one is the same game, just rebranded for a different location or release with some different elements. But there was also a title released. I literally could not find anything anywhere on it, and it's an Atari title. And Atari is a pretty big, renowned gaming brand, so you'd think there would be at least something out there, but there isn't. This game seems to sometimes get confused with My Secret Diary, but they are definitely two separate titles. The main name that I saw bouncing around a lot was Emma My Secret Diary, but a lot of the cover art was in French. And it seems like with this Emma character, they did have their own version of the Imagine series, which again, I feel like was probably Atari's way to cash in on the new drive in girly gaming shovelware. I could only find 3 examples, one being the diary game, one being a pop star game, and one being a doctor game, and they just scream and echo the Imagine Girl game branding. If you do know anything about this game, please let me know. I would love to know what it was like. Now we've covered all of the games, let's jump into our reflection and analyze as to why these titles appeared the way they did. If we look at these games as what they were categorized as, the truly interesting thing about these titles to me is that they were marketed as games and sold for a price that would make you think that if you ignored the title and cover art, you would genuinely think that they were a game. Diary Girl was sold for $30, which in English pounds is about £23. And Imagine My Secret World, I remember, was being sold for a similar price, maybe a little bit less, but still, for what you're actually getting from the title and the lifetime of the game and how long you're probably going to play it for, it's fairly extortionate. Especially given that the main bulk and content of these games you can replicate with a notebook and some glitter pens for like £3, or back in the day probably like £1.50, which, considering that they were charging like £23 for these titles, is kind of wild. I think as well, when we look at the actual gaming elements of these, I feel like these titles probably would have been better without these games included at all, because they're just so forgettable and unchallenging and unentertaining, even for girls aged 8 and below or above, whoever this game was like specifically targeted at. I feel like they're just not challenging enough or engaging enough to justify the price point, or to justify it being categorized as a game at all. And I think these games in particular are kind of like the pinnacle of shovelware. I know I talked about in the Imagine games a lot that a couple of the titles are like poster child for shovelware girly game titles, but these in particular, they just are the definition of shovelware for me. And I do think they really reflect that no matter what buzzwords, ideologies they chuck at you in their marketing for these games, they do really represent the neglect of quality that the gaming industry felt that young girls deserved at the time. However, if we imagine that all of these titles were rebranded not as games but as a whole other genre as a whole, as some sort of different girly digital software for the DS rather than a game, I feel like they actually have a lot of value. First off, I myself personally feel really fond memories for these games. Like, I really enjoyed them, especially as a girl who really wanted to be independent and feel more mature. I was able to express that feeling and want in a way that was safe and accessible for me. And like I mentioned earlier on, it is a place where young kids, girl or boy, could express their true feelings without their parents' intervention or others' judgment. Which, as a kid, having a space to do that was very, very rare. And I feel like having the ability to organize your life, schedule things, do like those sort of admin-y life things like remember addresses and things like that, developing the building blocks for life skills like scheduling, organization, and finding healthy ways to express your emotions and feelings. Obviously as well, the design choices vary wildly from game to game. My personal favourite is Imagine My Secret World, and I also do really like the Winx Secret Diary game. I feel like they're the better of the bunch. They are more aesthetically pleasing and nicer to look at. Diary Girl is obviously wildly bright and crazy and erratic and interesting to look at. We obviously then see My Secret Diary, which is the complete opposite of that. It's actually quite boring, which I guess it was probably quite appealing for some kids who didn't want that overly stimulating visual style. Girls who actually understood the value of being organized and wanting to be independent probably would have found a lot more value in it than the younger audience did. I know obviously we spoke about right at the beginning of this video that given how diaries developed in popular media and culture in like the late 1990s into the 2000s, many boys and men probably felt like keeping a diary or journal was demasculating, as it was presented as a way to express your emotions, which obviously being emotive is typically in society be a girl's thing. Women are emotional, men are not, which obviously is incorrect. Men should be able to share their emotions and express how they're feeling as much as women are able to. And I feel like the reason why there was no boys' diary games, other than the fact that there was the societal standard that men shouldn't be emotive and should not express their emotions, possibly the fact that there was so much content out there targeted towards young boys in the gaming industry, companies just did not feel the need to release a boys' diary game because they felt like it would be a monetary loss. It would be a waste of their time because there was so much out there for boys. Whereas for the girls' side of things, we see in TV and media and film that this is a popular trope, stereotype of girls writing their diaries, teenage girls expressing their feelings. So why not put this into game form? At this time as well, the DS sort of titles were very, very similar across all different game development companies. I feel like they were all essentially copying each other and trying to like out fashion designer each other or out vet each other. There really was not a lot new cropping up in the gaming industry specifically for girls and women. So having this new range of diary games was probably quite exciting and intrigued a lot of girl gamers, which obviously then probably were disappointed when they actually played the game and realized that it's not actually a game. It's a diary life organization tool for children who really probably don't need to be organizing their life. They were kind of just a passing trend and gimmick, which represents a real good overview of the girly shovelware titles of the 2000s. But that's going to be the end of today's video. I really hope you enjoyed reminiscing on these weird diary games from our childhood. And if you did, please don't forget to leave it a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more videos just like this one. And comment down below any games, series, or titles that you would like me to cover in future videos. I do have lots and lots of ideas myself of games that I want to cover, but it is always nice to show things that you guys want to see too. And perhaps you guys know some games that I don't. So it would be really, really interesting to research into those and make a video about them. But thank you so much for watching. Hydrate to stay great, get your daily calorie intake, and I will see you in the next one.